Hello everyone, and welcome back to the Centre for Legal Innovations webinar series. We're absolutely delighted today to bring you the Legal Techie Tuesday series featuring Jean Turner from LawHawk. Jean's the Managing Director there, but he also is the Centre for Legal Innovations New Zealand representative for our advisory board. So in many capacities, we're delighted to see you here today, Jean. Jean's going to be chatting about the LawHawk document automation process systems, etc. They're doc automation specialists. As folks may know, and Jean will tell us a little bit more about that, they do create precedents, but also very much focus and customise the precedents that you've got in a way that makes them obviously much more accessible and much more consistent with the demands of a modern legal practice in terms of rapid turnaround. He will particularly be featuring HotDocs, as you would have seen in the description, because that's the basis on which they provide their services. So on that note, Jean, again, welcome. Fabulous to have you. I'm now going to go off screen and hand it all over to you.
So hello everyone. I'm Jean Turner, and really the aim for today is to give you a bit of an introduction to LawHawk, and also in particular HotDocs, which is the main software that we use, and which I think some of you will be familiar with through already having used it either in your own firm directly or via products like SoftDocs and LawDocs, etc. Sorry, I'll just get my slides changing. So what we'll aim to cover today is just a bit about me, not too much, but a little bit of my background and why document automation was something that I thought was particularly relevant for me, and perhaps why it might also be something that's relevant for you as well. And we'll look at some of the various attempts that I've had at getting it going over the years, some of the successes and failures, and what I've learned along the way. We'll look at what I thought was the missing piece of the puzzle in terms of why I couldn't really get things going in previous attempts, and how that led to the creation of LawHawk. So we'll look at the key technology that we use, particularly focusing on HotDocs. I'll also show you something else that we've been working on in relation to client intake information, which I think will be interesting and relevant as well. And I'll finish off before we do some questions with any tips that I've got for how you could get your projects going successfully. So start off with a little bit about me. I've been around law for 22 years now. I started off in 1997. I've worked at Buddle Findlay a couple of times, Westpac Banking Corporation, CMS Cameron McKenna in London, and Chapman Tripp. I was a partner at Buddle Findlay for 6 years between 2009 and 2014, specialising in corporate and finance law, and also have an MBA from Victoria University. I left Buddle Findlay at the end of 2014, really looking for a new challenge, and something else exciting to do, and ended up establishing LawHawk in 2015, and we went live in 2016. And so now we work with law firms. We help them with bespoke automation, automating their own documents and processes, or licensing them to use some of our own material, or sometimes it's somewhere in between where we can adapt what we've got to fit their requirements. We also work alongside law firms to try and design solutions for their clients, and we also work directly with corporate and government customers to help them, whether it's in HR or legal or procurement. And we've had some good successes along the way. Earlier this year in July, we were successful in the IACCM Asia Pacific Award for operational improvement, alongside our customer Housing New Zealand, or Kāinga Ora, as they're now known, for some work we've done automating their construction contracts. So a lot of what we're going to cover today is heavily influenced by my own experiences and issues as a practicing lawyer. I think that based on the discussions I've had with many other lawyers, that there's a lot of that's relevant more generally across the profession, because I think some of the challenges are pretty well known and understood. There is a fair bit of by lawyers for lawyers, I suppose, in the way we've designed our solutions. And that does quite rightly attract a reasonable amount of skepticism in the legal tech space, where you see lawyers sort of seen a problem and gone off and built some new technology that uniquely can solve the problem. I think we're different in the sense that we haven't really tried to do that. What we've tried to do is to go out and find what we think is the best technology that's available, and then we've learned how to get the most out of it that we can. And really what LawHawk is now about is trying to help others to get the benefit of being able to do that without having to go through quite the same level of effort to learn it yourselves. We do get to have a fair degree of input into the the direction of HotDocs. We talk to them regularly. We're able to give them suggestions on where we think they should be adding new features, and some of those have been taken up even relatively recently. But we're leaving it to them. HotDocs is a major company. We'll touch on that shortly. Owned by Abacus Next, and very wealthy owners behind them. So they've got all the resources in the world to be able to do stuff, and we're certainly not trying to compete with that. The picture up there, by the way, is from 2009. That was when I first became a partner. So I found that while I was preparing for this, and it was interesting to see all the youthful enthusiasm, how I was going to change the way my firm worked and legal profession, before I got hit with reality of what the actual day job's like. So a typical day in law, and certainly it's my experience, is that it used to be about thinking. I can recall when I first started out talking to older partners about their experiences coming through, and particularly a couple of partners at Cameron McKenna reminiscing one day about just how much the profession had changed even then. And back when they first were coming through, everything was done by mail and post, I suppose, and so it was, there was a lot more time in between communications. Someone would send a letter, "Dear partners, we've been instructed on this matter, and further correspondence shall follow in due course," or something like that. And you might reply with, "Dear partners, thank you for your letter. I look forward to hearing from you." So it was a lot slower. But these days, people are just at you the whole time. I think they're firing instructions at you, and they want instant responses. You get phone calls immediately after an email asking if you got it and what's the answer. And I think some of it is not helped by the hourly rates, which have become so high that I think clients are kind of scared to come to lawyers until it's really often too late to help them. And so you only get part of the information, and then you're expected to be able to do something quite magical. So generally, I think that the clients they don't really want to pay for that thinking anymore, or drafting. They really just want the sign off or the document, and they want it really quickly. And so that makes it very challenging in terms of how you can do that affordably if you haven't got really good systems, and there's a lot of manual rework involved. There's also issues, I think, with the junior staff who are increasingly, they want more autonomy. They want to be able to do more of the job themselves. At the same time, they also want training and constant feedback as well. And so there's challenges in balancing those competing requirements. So for me, as a corporate and finance lawyer, a lot of what I did was really document heavy. A lot of the documents took a long time to draft. They all needed to be done incredibly urgently, and so really there was a lot of times where there were very long hours. A lot of time that you were in the office rather than with family and friends. And it was quite hard to be competitive, because you were doing pretty much the same sort of work as everybody else was. It's hard to stand out as being particularly differentiated. And if I had 15 years experience, someone else would have 30, or an existing relationship, or just be prepared to work harder for a lower rate. I think I also found that for me personally, I need time to think about things, to kind of put everything in order before I can do my best work. So they were the sort of challenges that I had in legal practice. So that really led me into document automation as something which I saw had a lot of potential to help me to address those issues. I first came across it in 2000, almost by mistake, really. I was working at Westpac at the time, and one of the IT team came to help me on something completely different. And it was just that he saw how I was working, at the time, and he couldn't believe that lawyers would spend so much time searching through documents looking for square brackets and typing in the details over and over. So he was able to help me to get the first loan agreement done, and it took about an hour's work down to 3 or so minutes. And so I was instantly converted that this was something that we really should be doing. It was going to make a massive difference to me in the way that I worked. And so I pursued that really hard for the next 14 or so years, because I saw it as being a key to having a more sustainable career in law. The guy that was helping me disappeared pretty quickly, though, when he realised that I wasn't just wanting one loan agreement done, I wanted a whole heap of them. And so I had to sort of try and find other ways to be able to get it up and running and working. And I kind of didn't really get to the point where I figured it out enough until I'd sort of made my mind up to go and try something different. So I guess now I sort of, sometimes I think about it and think about what kind of career I could have had, or others might be able to have, now that some of the stuff is so much more available. But also when we're working with law firms now, really what we're trying to do is enable them to get those kind of benefits that we were looking to get ourselves. So some of you may be familiar with document automation through your use of it already. Others might be coming to it a little bit colder. I'll just touch on some of the benefits I think are readily achievable. The interesting thing probably with this list actually is that there aren't necessarily trade-offs, and that typically if you're doing something faster, you'd expect that quality will be lower, that type of thing. But I think document automation just has this potential to increase speed, but also quality and consistency at the same time. Certainly in terms of speed, you can really reduce hours of work down to minutes. Our client, Kāinga Ora, that we won the award with, they were taking 4 or so hours to do construction contracts. They can now do them in an hour or so. Very, very quick turn improvements. Generally, I think they're probably getting 75% or more sort of increases in the speed of delivery of documents. But quality's also gone up because a lot of the options are all now automatically enforced once you make a decision that flows consistently through all the documents, and so there's much less chance that you could make a mistake. We've also been able to help with training. Instead of somebody just spending their time furiously searching through the document looking for square brackets and trying to get it done as quick as they can see information as they go through the process that can help them to understand why they're even being asked the question, and maybe which options they should be choosing in different circumstances. And it should flow through into to better compliance, because you're able to more subtly guide people through the options that you want them to choose, and that you would choose yourself if you were doing it, and you only show them things that they should be seeing at the time, so there's less chance that they can go off script. And it should really flow through into better job satisfaction. Obviously, people are going to be happier if they're able to get their work done to really high standards, and they're not having to stay longer hours to do that. And they can focus on doing stuff that they find more enjoyable and higher value. And the last point really is, I think it's probably not something that a lot of people are focused on right now, but I think it's one of the things that will be massively valuable going forward, is the options to use data. So one of the key things with document automation is that every question is basically like a data field, and so you're generating huge amounts of data, which could be dates or amounts, milestones and when they're due, that type of thing. And so instead of the contract just being a Word document that gets signed and then sort of shoved in a drawer, you've really got an opportunity for the contract to become almost like a living thing that helps you make better decisions in real time. And there's a lot of effort that's going into AI to try and scan existing documents and take unstructured data out of contracts and structure it. But it just seems to me so much more obvious that if you could create the data at the same time as you're creating the contract, then that would be a much better way to go about it. So I think there's huge scope for document automation to add value in many ways across organizations. So in terms of my own experiences, as I said, I've been looking at this really since around 2000, and I had a lot of goes at it, and a lot of false starts and dead ends. So The stuff I did at Westpac was good. It was deceptively simple, probably to begin with, because the documents weren't the most complex, and they were quite similar. So once we'd done one, we're able to do others off the back of that. But I left the bank probably a year or so later, and I think almost immediately something needed to be changed for some of the documents, and nobody really understood quite how it had all been done. To be honest, I didn't really understand a lot of the stuff that was under the hood either, but because there was no one around that really knew how it all worked, they had to go back and start using the unautomated versions of the templates. And when I came back to Westpac again to do some more work at the end of 2003, one of the first things I did was got it going again, but I'm fairly sure that it would have again fallen out of use after I was gone, just because it wasn't really something that was able to really be easily sort of maintained. While I was in the UK, Cameron McKenna actually had HotDocs, which I identified at the time. I just never had time to look into it. It wasn't something that we were using in my team, and I guess I was just too busy with other stuff. But it always stuck in my mind that that there was specialist technology out there, and so when it came back up again years later, it was something I'd heard of and was familiar with. So when I got back to Barrelfinlay, sort of 2007, 2008, it was something I was really keen to progress as part of initially a senior associate, and then a young partner, trying to think about how I could build a practice and really differentiate what we were doing. And we had a few things that had already been in place. One of the partners, or senior associate at the time, who's a partner now, had done something pretty neat with Excel using macros, and he was able to generate a whole bunch of documents for quite low value financing transactions. And I think he was doing some of his jobs at $600 for the whole job and still getting premium. So I thought that was pretty neat. But it wasn't, again, very scalable, and it wasn't something that was particularly suitable for the more complex documents that I was really thinking about. And so with the help of our IT team, I sort of looked at different ways that we might be able to do it. We had a really clever young guy who he just wanted to build his own solution. So that's what he tried to do, and it was pretty amazing. It looked great. It just never worked to the point where it was actually useful. And eventually he gave up on that, and we said, look, why don't we just try the word macro thing again, because at least that worked last time. That wasn't something he was particularly interested in, so he left not long after that, and we never really got anything going. Someone else suggested that we already had a product called InfoPath, and I don't know what we had it for. I've never seen it before or since, but he was able to do some quite neat stuff using it. Again, almost to the point where we could start using it, but not quite. And it was him that actually came to me eventually and said, look, this is just taking too long. It's not designed to be used in this way. And if we just got HotDocs, we would be able to probably get stuff done 4 times quicker and actually finish something. So that was really how we first came into using HotDocs. The process from there was was a lot better. He was able to do a lot of the coding a lot more quickly, but the challenges that we then sort of experienced was that I still had to create huge amounts of instructions for him, trying to think of all of the questions that you might need to ask without really having any idea how it would make most sense to communicate that to him, or what was even possible. And he would then have to take that and go away and try and figure out like how you would fit a loan and security and a guarantee document together, and make that whole thing work. And he had his other projects that were a priority for him. It would take ages for him to get to it. When he finally did return something to me, I would inevitably be doing something else, and so there'd be quite a long delay. And then when I did check it, it wasn't really what I thought I wanted, but I couldn't really remember what I'd asked for either. So that didn't work very well. We tried having him sit in my office for 2 months. Almost the day that he arrived, something came up that needed my full attention for pretty much 2 months, and so that didn't work either. And it was really when he left to another role that I said, look, is this the best way to do this? Or if I learned how to use the software myself, could I actually cut out all of that sort of back and forwards and instructions and just get some stuff done? And he said he thought that would work. And so that's how I started doing it. And I learned enough to be proficient, but to be honest, I was still, I was a team leader at that stage. I had other partners to manage, I had my own team to manage, I had clients that I had to be doing work for, and everything else that goes with the day job. So it wasn't happening. So really, I guess that was probably the key thing, or the key learning that we took out of it was, firstly, you're just not going to be able to achieve really high quality outcomes if you're trying to use something that's not designed for that, and sort of use some feature in the back of it in a way that wasn't really intended. And then secondly, you need specialists in terms of being able to actually do the automation. Someone who's got legal knowledge and knows what the what's possible with the software, but also what the outcomes need to be. And if you can do that, then you can do quite complex stuff actually very quickly, because you can sort of build it and test it in real time, and avoid all that sort of like extra layer of instructions and large delays while you have to wait. So that's really the key is, anyone who's legally trained, I think, if they wanted to, could learn how to use the software and create some really neat solutions. But it's also not the kind of thing that you can just dip in and out of. It's kind of one of those things, if you're not doing it regularly, it's quite challenging to come back in a month's time and try and remember what you were doing and why and how you were doing it. So to us, that was the key thing, was that we needed to combine the skill sets between having the legal knowledge and also being able to do the coding. And we've seen numerous examples since we set up LawHawk where we've come into projects where people have had one of those skills but not both, and they haven't been able to do it to a level where the outcomes are good. And so we've been able to help to tidy that up. So in terms of the technology that we use, actually we sort of, because we're not like tied to any particular software, or we haven't invented anything in that sense, we're always looking at all sorts of different things that we could be using, or our customers could be using, and how things might fit together. And so we're always keeping an eye on various things. What I'm going to talk about mostly today is HotDocs. That's the core software that we've done most of our work with. But we're also really interested in other technologies that are coming out around, for example, workflow, digital signing, contract management. There's a whole heap of different things that we're interested in, and because document generation sort of sits in the middle of so many processes, we get exposed to quite a few different ideas. And so we're kind of quite open, I suppose, and always sort of keeping an eye on what else is out there. And so, as well as showing HotDocs, I will show you something that we've been working on recently in terms of just client intake using web forms to gather up some information. But I'll focus on HotDocs more so for this session, and I'll just sort of explain a little bit about them if you're not that familiar, in terms of why we choose to work with them. As I said, we could literally work with anybody if we want to. We've chosen HotDocs because we just have confidence that when we're scoping a job using HotDocs, that we know what it can do. We know there's very little that it can't do in terms of complexity of documents, and so it's a good tool for us to work with when we're trying to scope our jobs and give people certainty around fees and that it will actually work. So they've been around a long time. They've 30 years or so. They really were the pioneers with document automation. As I said, they were at Cameron McKenna back in 2001 when I was there. And they've got over 1.5 million users around the world, and you can see from some of the logos on the sides, they've got a customer list that's really enviable, really strong in banking, insurance, and some major law firms using them as well. So they're a very very strong provider in the space. And what we've noticed is that over the last few years, there's also been some really major enhancements in terms of the underlying product. So some of you may have come across HotDocs in sort of earlier stages. Be fair to say that the product had a pretty dated look. It was very powerful and useful underneath, but it just didn't look that modern. And the new product is really great. It's made a major difference in terms of how people respond to it. So what I'll do now is just give you a little bit of an overview about how HotDocs works. And so I'll look at the template authoring part of it, what the user sees, and then the output. So just starting here, this is like a screenshot of HotDocs Author, and that's the tool that you'd be using if you wanted to do some template development in HotDocs. And it's an add-in to Word. So one of the really good things about HotDocs compared to some other systems is it actually does work on top of Microsoft Word. So you get all of the benefit of the styles that you want in your templates, the clause numbering and cross-referencing and all that sort of stuff. And so it's it's really good. If you've got a good underlying template, then you can do the automation on top of that. And you can see on the top of the screen that there's an if statement. If you're contemplating marriage, and if that's yes, then one of the two paragraphs that's in there will get dropped in, and to do with contemplation of marriage. And so you've got two options. One is whether or not the will take effect only if the marriage occurs, and the other one is it'll take effect whether or not the marriage occurs. And so with a simple little bit of scripting like that, just using the field editor on the right-hand side of the screen, it's very easy to tag up the document, and then we can also choose whether or not we're talking about a marriage or a civil union, and we need to put the name of the person who the marriage will be with into the document, and we can set some formatting, in this case, to say that we want it to be bolded and uppercase. So it's a very, very simple and relatively quick process to be able to overlay the coding onto the Word template. From a user perspective, they don't need to see any of that stuff. What they interact with is a simple web form. And so looking at that particular sort of bit of coding that we were just looking at there, this is the screen that they would see. And so for those of you that have used to seeing the older versions of HotDocs, you'll notice there's quite a difference in terms of how it now looks. Down the left-hand side, you've got the outline, which I kind of think of as being like a checklist of all of the things that are really relevant to the whatever job you're working on. That's all fully customizable, but you can basically get the user to think about everything that they should think about, and then drill down on the stuff that's relevant, and stuff that's not relevant can be sort of hidden from further view. So you can see the questions that we were just talking about in the middle there. You've got the, are they contemplating marriage or civil union with anyone? If yes, is it marriage or civil union we're talking about? And who are they going to be getting married to? And then the question about whether or not the will takes effect only if the marriage or civil union occurs, or whether or not. So very, very quick and simple to work through. At the very top of the screen, I'm not sure if it's visible there, there's a link to a video, so you can actually embed video guidance onto screens if that's helpful. And so instead of just telling somebody what to do, you can even show them what to do. And over on the right-hand side, you can see there's also this additional information screen. And so here we've just put a little summary about what the actual legal requirement is in our Wills Act, and why we need to ask some of these questions around an impending marriage. So the next thing is the actual document itself, and this is just a screen clip of the preview mode. But effectively at any stage, you can see the document as it's being built, and when you generate it, you generate a Word document, and from there on you can just edit it as you would any other Word document, and it's got all the formatting and everything that you would want to be in there. In this case, you can see that it's got the names of all of the people that are referred to in the will are all set out in clause 1. HotDocs has nicely gone through and put those in alphabetical order automatically. It's also put the semicolons at the end of each one, and it's recognised that the and should go here at the end of 1.9 before a full stop there. So there's a whole bunch of things that you can do using HotDocs that your users probably won't really appreciate has been done for them. But yeah, they won't have to go through and do some of that formatting. They won't have to worry about pluralizing or making singular certain references. So it's very, very simple. And here we've got the clause that we chose as the document. And it's also possible with HotDocs to manage styles very simply. So you can insert one template into another template and choose whether or not the styles from the inserted template will stay as they were, or it'll take on the styles of the document it's being inserted into. So that enables us, in relation to the wills and powers of attorney, we've been licensing that to firms and been able to say they can effectively get our product but styled to meet their own requirements in terms of how they want the fonts and headings and everything to look as well. Just a different example with HotDocs. This is a way more complicated sort of scenario, but I guess, for being honest about it, there are cheaper solutions in the market than HotDocs, so why not just use one of them? Well, what we've found is that when you get into the more complex stuff, certainly we've been able to do all of the stuff that we want to do with HotDocs, and we know that some of the other tools we've looked at just can't do that. So this example was quite a complex property finance lending transaction. You've got a wide variety of different facility agreements, security types, guarantees, intercreditor deeds, certificates, emails. There's a whole bunch of stuff that needs to be generated. And so using HotDocs, we can go through and set up the questionnaire so that it's not just doing one document at a time, but you can actually choose all the documents that are relevant. You can choose which documents you want to generate now. So you could come back in and out and do some now, some later. And down the left-hand side, the outline will actually adapt according to which combinations of documents you've chosen. So you'll only get asked for the information that you actually need at that time. So for some of the stuff, which is, I think, to be honest, where law firms will have to focus more in the future, that's why we think HotDocs is such a great tool. If you're thinking of document automation and really focusing on those very, very simple documents that pretty much anybody will be able to do without any legal training just by filling in a web form, then I just can't see that being something where there's going to be a lot of value in the longer term, because if anyone can do it, everybody will do it, and it's going to be quite challenging to differentiate on that sort of stuff. So this type of thing is really focused on taking the unique expertise that lawyers in a firm have and embedding it into a system that then their own staff can do very, very high quality work that's not at the commodity end so much more effectively. So the output of that type of process is, example here, you could spit out all of these documents, could all come down in one single download. Here you can see they've all been automatically renamed with information from within the interview to make that easier. And at the very top, there's a little data file there, a HotDocs answer file. And so that can enable you to come back in at any time to be able to regenerate documents, but also I think demonstrate that there's so much data that's available for other processes as well. Just in terms of integrations, this is just a screenshot from the HotDocs website. There's a lot of information on their website if you're interested in terms of how HotDocs could work for you in your own environment. But it does come with a very wide range of APIs, and it can be integrated into a number of other systems, which could mean pulling data out of those systems or returning data back into those systems, or returning documents into a document repository. So there's a lot of scope for that. But at the same time, HotDocs is also very, very useful just out of the box on a standalone basis, which is how we've been using it to date. And I don't think you really need to focus hugely on some of those details around pulling and pushing data until you've really had some experience and are able to work out which are the things that are going to add the most value and where you want to focus. And then once you've got that experience, you can then sort of actually build something that meets your requirements and that you're going to get a really strong return on investment from. One thing we have done though is get an integration between HotDocs Advance and our own customer portal, and that was at the simpler end of things in terms of what you can do. And really the reason why we wanted to do that was just to give our customers some different alternative ways they could access the functionality of HotDocs, but also to be able to put it, I guess, amongst other information and resources. So you can embed HotDocs in a way where, that on this page, which is part of our sandbox, you can give information for users around what to expect and why they should be using this document, linking off to like a video or some other resources. You could build out like a sort of a hub of knowledge, which could also include other training materials and other resources and things. So there's, I think, potential for quite a lot of flexibility to think about HotDocs not just as a document generation tool, but how it fits into the overall way that you want the firm to run, including the way that you interact with your staff and share information with them and potentially your clients as well. So that's how we've sort of approached using HotDocs with integrations at this stage. So what I'll do now is I'll just jump in and show you a little bit more of a pretty common sort of example, which is wills and enduring power of attorney documents, and how we've automated those using HotDocs and some of the benefits of being able to do that. So I'll just bring this across here. So what we're looking at now is HotDocs Advanced. So this is another new system that HotDocs have brought out relatively recently, and this is the out-of-the-box sort of solution that anybody can access. And you can really flexibly allocate amongst different groups of users. You can create work groups, which is sort of where people that have got to work together can collaborate on what they call work items. And you can assign different templates to different groups very flexibly so that people can see the range of documents that they need to have access to. And I've got an existing work item here, which I can open up, and let's give that a second to pull through. And so it's a package of a will and also 2 enduring power of attorney documents. And associated to those powers of attorney is some explanation documents that also need to be generated as well. So one of the really neat things with HotDocs is the ability to be able to generate all of these documents at once rather than doing one at a time. And I think some of the older versions of HotDocs that are being used with SoftDocs and LawDocs are still based around doing one document at a time, and so it's not quite as efficient as what's now possible. But if I come in here, so we've set it up like that banking document where you can choose which documents you want to do. And if I start by saying I just want to do a will, then it's really quick to be able to come through and enter all of the information for whoever the person is that making the will. We've got some optional stuff in here that, for unusual circumstances, if I was blind or something like that, how would we deal with that? But that's not relevant here. And then we can set out all of the people that are relevant to the will, and we'll just capture their information once. And you can see there's very little information that's actually needed for each person. And so it's pretty quick to be able to run through and say, well, there's the partner, that's the brother, another brother, got a son, a daughter, another daughter, father, mother, got a family trust, and a charity, for example. And so having captured all that sort of information up here, we can also look at whether or not trustee corporations are relevant, and in this case, let's say they're not. Here's our screen that we were just looking at in terms of the contemplation of marriage. So if I'd said, no, that's not something that's applicable, this is where, from a kind of ease of use and compliance perspective, it just takes away all of the noise. You don't have to look at anything if it's not relevant. But if it is relevant, we can really quickly choose which options we want to go through. We can skip over the committed relationship. Choose then who's going to be the executor. As I said, we've got examples where you can embed other guidance, videos, written guidance, and things there if you want. And so here I'd choose the partner, Sarah. I could choose somebody else as well if I wanted, so it's very easy to add one or more. If I chose one, we'd have questions would come up in terms of any backups and whether the backup would come in only if the both of the originals are gone, or if any one of them. So yeah, it's a good idea to choose a backup. So let's choose one of the brothers to do that. In terms of disposal of the body, there's lots of options: cremation, burial. You can say whether you want to specify what happens to the body or not. If yes, we can drill down on being buried with someone and where that will be. So hopefully it's sort of, you can see this becomes quite a tailored will, something that's very specific to this particular person in terms of what they want. We entered some details up above in terms of children. So again, if there were no children, we'd just go straight past that screen. But because there are children, we can choose yes as a guardian, and it's currently Sarah, but if the new guardian would be George, and we could specify a backup, which could be Simon. So that's a very, very quick process. Mainly by now, starting to just tick off the options and the details we've already added. When you get into the particular gifts, there's a smorgasbord of options there. So, I mean, they might just decide they want to go straight to allocating the remaining estate because everything's going to go to Sarah, or they could choose to give pretty much anything to anybody. And in this case, we've got a gift of money, pets, and trustee appointment for the trust. And so for the money, we could give $10,000 to each of the children if they're living at the age of 21, and we could quickly run through Peter and Zoe in the same way there. Pet could go to Peter, and the trustee power of appointment and removal could go to Sarah. And then when you get into the remaining estate, there's options there that very commonly somebody will just want to give everything to their spouse, or if they've passed away, to their children, or if there isn't a spouse, just to the children. Or you might want to open up all of the options and go through everything, but it's very quick if we just want to choose this common option of being able to give everything to the spouse. Then choose Sarah, yes to the children category, which is the children, and we'll say that they have to be age 21. And for a backstop, we can break it into two parts, and we can give one part to each of the parents, for example. So very, very quick generating a will. One thing that we've added in is this final checks screen, which doesn't actually go into the document, but it's the type of thing that you can start to use a tool like HotDocs for, which is just to help the user to think about things that may be relevant and that might need some more attention. So what are the higher risk areas that you might want to consider? Well, yeah, they might be, if you've got children from previous relationships, or you're planning to leave somebody out of the will, an estranged child or something like that. So just having a sort of a question that can sort of force you to go through and think about this stuff. And if we have chosen yes, there's a further question down here, which makes I guess draws the attention to the fact you need to think about that a bit harder. So it can sort of do a bit of workflow, a bit of training and compliance type stuff. But one thing which I touched on before is the ability to do multiple documents at a time. So when people do their wills, I think a lot of times it would be a really good idea for them to also do their powers of attorney, but that would typically be about the same amount, if not more work, as doing the will, and so it could become quite a time-consuming and potentially expensive thing to get the client to do, and they might be a bit resistant to doing it. But if you've got all the information already for the will, and we just tick those options, it's really quick to be able to say, well, let's also knock up a power of attorney as well. Let's say we've got one, Sarah. Again, we've got some checks here which don't go in the document, but we just make sure that Sarah can actually be the attorney, that she's not under 20, she's not bankrupt, and not subject to any of these orders. And again, we can sort of whip through the all of the options that are in the statutory forms. If you want to, you can open up some of the more complex options, but often it'll be relatively simple. For example, if we this question on whether or not the attorney should be able to enter into a new will, you can see on the right hand side here there's quite a bit of guidance around that, and I guess that's an example of something where my first reaction would probably be like, why would we do that? We're just doing a will. So it seems a bit odd that we'd be doing a power of attorney that would allow the attorney to do a new will. But if you read the guidance, you can see that there might be circumstances that change. You might need to sell the house to pay for going into a rest home, and if the will was done in a certain way where one of the children was only going to get the house, and if the house doesn't exist, they might miss out entirely, then it would make sense to give the attorney the ability to be able to do a new will that could really preserve the will maker's intention. So it's really useful to have some of that guidance to help choose the right options. And then you've got a wide number of options that are available, and typically if you're working through a template, and if we want to choose none of the above, we'd have to go through and manually delete all of the options that are there. With document automation, you just choose none of the above and it automatically rips everything out that's not needed. But if you want to, you can add stuff back in very simply and just work your way through the details. Now I'll just speed up a little bit. I'm taking a little bit too long here. So if I finish the process, what I can do is I can generate all of the documents in one go. And so there we've got 5 documents, and each of them is all nicely set up. And if I quickly go into the power of attorney, for example, you can see we've got a really nicely formatted document here. We've turned on options to strike out the options that aren't chosen, and we've pre-ticked the options that are chosen. And so it should be really simple for the client and the law firm to be able to say, yep, that's exactly what we intended. And if you need to make any further edits, you can. But hopefully we've saved a lot of time in that process. So the other, excuse me, the other thing I wanted to quickly touch on then was on client intake. And so HotDocs does have some new functionality which is coming, and what it's going to enable is that that a law firm will be able to send out a link to a client and ask the client to complete some of the information for the interview, and that's going to be awesome. It's something that we've been pushing for quite a long time, and I'm really excited to see it coming. But I've also flipped my thinking a little bit on some of this, because if you keep the outcome in mind and what you're trying to do, you don't necessarily expect that the client's going to know the exact words that are needed for the will, or that they'll be able to do that as well as the lawyer would. But what you really want to do is encourage the law firm, the client, to think about some of the issues and give you the information that you need. So this is a firm that we've just started doing some work with, and they use the HotDocs wills in the background. But they've also put something on the website which helps to bring in new clients that they wouldn't otherwise be getting. Really nice, easy to sort of click on the button to start the process. And the client can then, basically on this page, see a really nice questionnaire, branded and styled to match the firm. All the language can be adapted so that it fits the sort of the style of the firm in terms of how they like to come across. And it's designed to sort of try and replicate the stuff that's in the HotDocs questionnaire, but not to actually gather up the information to automatically stick it in, but to ask the right sort of questions. So if I quickly say, fill in my details, actually I can skip some of that. When we get to say what are the unusual circumstances, if there are some, just a free text box, so the person can put in whatever it is about themselves that they feel like you need to know, and you can then work out what the best way to deal with that is in the document. And if they've already got an existing will, then you could give them the ability to upload the existing will, so you can review it and try and figure out what's different. But you could also ask them, there's probably some reason why they want a new will, and so again you can ask them to give you some information on that. That won't go into the new will, obviously, but it'll really help you to understand what it is that they're trying to do. So I'll just jump back into the slides. So I've probably run a little bit over time, so I won't take too long in terms of some of these, but I have got some tips, and more than happy if any of you are interested in document automation, whether you're even thinking of using HotDocs or something else, or working with us or someone else. If you'd like to bounce some things around, then I'm more than happy to. But the key things that I would say would be, do something. I think the stuff is out there. There's a lot of solutions. It doesn't have to be hard, but I do see a lot of people that overanalyze things. They're looking for like a perfect tool that hardly costs anything, and that doesn't exist. If it existed, we'd all know about it and we'd all be using it. So there's always going to have to be some compromise. But I think what you can do is, it's very easy these days to do some trials, to see what's out there, to play around in a sandbox type environment and get a sense of how something will fit for you, and just keep in mind nothing's perfect, but nothing's permanent either. So you know, if it's good for you now and it's better than what you're currently doing, that's awesome. If something better comes along, yeah, you can always choose to move, if that makes sense. I'd really suggest choosing an area that that you've already got some good documents and good systems in. You'll get a lot more value out of doing something like that, rather than trying to choose something you don't like, that you're not that good at, and you really just want to make go away, which is how a lot of the stuff is often sort of positioned, as, you know, taking away the mundane. I would say the upside is so much better if you can choose something that you want to do more of, because you can then market that to you know, to more clients. So you're not just doing the same amount of work quicker, you're getting the more work and you're making more money. And I'd start with people in your teams that actually want to do stuff and can make decisions and get things going, because getting quick wins is absolutely essential. And start small, learn and adapt. You'll change your mind about a whole bunch of things as you go. Like I showed you, I've still changed my mind around the client intake stuff. So you'll always see perhaps different ways that you might do things that might work better for different circumstances. So just eat the elephant one bite at a time. It's really important to spend time on working out the process and thinking about how you're going to roll it out. They talk about people, process, and then technology. It's absolutely right. If you automate a really bad process, you just get an automated bad process, and yeah, that can actually affect like the future uptake of, if people aren't get a bad experience, they might not give you a second chance. And think about, yeah, the costs. The biggest cost, I think, that I've come across with document automation is the years that I spent trying to do things on the cheap and not actually getting anything working. So yeah, the software licensing cost is potentially not the biggest cost that you'll need to think about. And I think last point I'll close on is don't worry about perfection. Yeah, there's a temptation to think about, I'll do this after I get my precedents sorted. Reality is that you'll never have perfect documents, but because everybody's going to be working off the same base, there'll be so much more opportunity for continuous improvement, as you'll be able to sort of, yeah, like get more consistency and see what changes you do need to make. So just focus on what you can do now, and don't worry about things not working. Some stuff won't work, that's fine. It's valuable to learn that too. You'll do better next time, but just try and get things going, and then start building from there. Terry, I probably should finish up because I know we've only got about 5 minutes to go.
Thanks, Jean, very much. Wonderful presentation, just a fabulous product. I know we've got a little bit of time for questions, so just while folks are thinking about that, if I could ask you one as well. Yeah. Once all the docs are done in draft, or I guess in final form, where are they living? Where are those documents living?
So they get saved back down into your own environment, and you'll just carry on as you normally would. So I know there's there are products out there that are trying to say that, like how you can get the document and keep it on the platform and manage negotiations and all that sort of stuff. I mean, that'd be amazing if they can do that, but it's a big change in terms of how people work. I've always been attracted to how you take 90% of the time out of the drafting, get it back into your DMS, and then carry on as you normally would. And when those other systems are really ready and everybody's happy to use them, great. But it's just hard to change people's behaviour that much, I think. So get them down locally.
And I guess it overcomes any questions or concerns about security in terms of the data, because it's just within your own system and the system security that you've got.
Yeah, so there's different ways you can do that. So the HotDocs hub with those work items, it's really flexible in terms of being able to reopen those work items and collaborate. It does involve the data being stored within. We're using a cloud version of HotDocs, so that's Microsoft Azure. They've got on-premise versions as well. The integration we had built doesn't store any information at all, because we know some people are sensitive around that. So because of the APIs, you can basically pick and mix and choose how you want to use it according to whatever your priorities are.
And that's all part of the conversation that you'd have with folks in terms of you kind of consulting with them?
Very much. I mean, yeah, it's we've learned a lot of the stuff, sort of as we've gone along, and now I think we're in a position where, we can help people. I'm working with a firm at the moment who are getting their own version of HotDocs installed, but I'm helping them with some of the ways that they might sort of set that up, thinking ahead to, some of the things that they'll inevitably want to be able to do down the line. I'm sort of helping them think about some of that, but earlier in the process.
And I think that's part of the suite of advice that you offer, isn't it? I mean, you can actually customize documents, help to build them, etc., but also work with folks in terms of what they've got and being able to customize that, or helping them basically to do what they need to do with those docs.
Pretty much. I mean, what we're doing is it's not an end in its own right. The documents are only being generated for some other purpose, and so being able to understand more about what the overall outcome is supposed to be, we can say, well, look, we can do this part, but you might want to look over here. These guys have got another solution that can, manage precedents really well, or that, can do digital signing, or, and often the different solutions can all be linked up. I mean, if you've got your precedents being managed really well, then you're probably going to have more data about which ones are used the most, which might help to influence which ones you automate, and you could then tag them up when you generate the documents so that they can go straight into digital signing and automatically be signed. So it's very much a continuum, and trying to figure out where people are at and what their biggest priorities are.
But just an amazing enhancement on efficiency. And I think, as you were saying, or the point you were making was then the ability to really be able to spend your time in conversation on the trickier or more complex stuff, to me just makes this very appealing as well.
Yeah, I just never felt like I had enough time when I was a lawyer to be focusing on the stuff that was really important. Like you sort of want to be trying to think about like this particular joint venture and these parties and what they're each going to be bringing to the table and how they need to work together. But often you're spending most of your time trying to look through 2 or 3 different example documents and pulling different pieces together, and it's just the wrong way round in terms of where the effort goes. So it's so much more satisfying if you can get that bit done and then sit down and really think it through.
Yeah, look, a really elegant solution, and thank you very much again, Jean, for your time and taking us through this. And folks, you'll find Jean on LinkedIn, and of course find him via his company website, LawHawk, as well. Again, thank you, Jean, and thank you everyone for your time today and spending this with us. You know that the Centre for Legal Innovation is all about the dissemination of knowledge and the sharing of experience. A great example of that, obviously, today. We have a number of events coming up still this year, and of course next year in this Legal Techy Tuesday series. We hope you're enjoying it and enjoying the opportunity to be able to sit at your desks and watch wonderful tech demos such as the one we've seen today. Do follow us on LinkedIn, Twitter or Facebook for all of the upcoming events. But for now and today, again, thank you very much, Jean, and thank you everyone for joining us. It's been a pleasure to spend the time with you.
Thanks, Terry, and thanks everyone.